Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Myth or Logic Radio. My name is Tom Murasso from BornToManifest.com, and we're so glad to have you with us today because we got some exciting guest for you, Kelly Woodruff. And Kelly has achieved the pinnacle of theatrical life, performing on Broadway in Will Rogers' Follies and Chorus Line and the touring company of West Side Story. But here's the exciting part. After his performing career ended due to injuries, he became the founder of a leading home design firm serving New York's upscale community, which continues to this day. But it's even more exciting because we're not going to be talking about home design or acting or Broadway or anything like that, because Kelly's life took an interesting direction and an about-face in 2003 when he attended two separate social events where he was introduced to Reconnected healers. So Kelly was intrigued enough to attend an introductory lecture and then embarked on the training to become a Reconnective healer. He then went home and started working with friends and then clients who reported significant health improvements, including complete recovery from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other chronic physical and emotional illnesses. Kelly is now one of only 3 people authorized by Dr. Eric Pearl, the founder of Reconnective Healing, to teach this extraordinary work, and he travels throughout the United States, Canada, and Europe doing so. So, Kelly, welcome to the show. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Tom. Thanks a lot for having me.
I tell you, I've been reading Eric Pearl's book, and I had heard of Reconnective Healing some time ago, but I never really understood too much about it until I started reading this book, and I'm just fascinated with it. So why don't we start off with you? Tell us about your background and how you became a Reconnective Healing practitioner and instructor.
Well, you did a pretty good job, actually. That was sort of my history in brief. I think the important point that I always like to start with anyone who's listening to the story about this work from the beginning is I was not somebody who was looking to become a healing practitioner. It wasn't like I woke up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be a healer today. You know, that wasn't at all the way that it went. In fact, I thought my life was in a really great place. I own an architectural interior design firm, as you said. Business was fine. I had a lot of nice friends. I had a very nice life in New York City. I traveled a lot, and things were actually going along just fine. As you mentioned, I was at first in California. And I went to a party and I met someone. We were doing the, what do you do thing. And I said, oh, well, I own an architectural interior design firm. What do you do? And this person said, well, I actually practice a kind of healing work, a new kind of healing work on the planet for the very first time. And I work for the company who teaches seminars and that stuff.
Ah, okay.
And I said, wow, that's very LA of you, being the jaded New Yorker that I am. And he said, no, really, would you like to see a little demo? And I said, sure, why not? And I put my hand out and I kind of, thought I might feel something. And I said, that's great and really interesting. And, if what I'm feeling, if what you're telling me, that's the way that you do the work, that's fantastic. But, I got to tell you one thing. I may or may not believe it and that may or may not work. But one thing I do know is that's something that you can do. You came in that way. That was probably a gift that you were born with. I don't really believe that you can teach people to do that. I think that there are people that have been on this planet maybe that could, but you can't teach somebody that.
Right.
And he said, no, actually, we teach seminars every weekend. And at that point, they had trained about 25,000 people around the world. Now we've trained about 65,000 people around the world. Right. And he said, and so I sort of, smiled and nodded my head and walked away and didn't think too much about it until a couple of weeks later when I was with some friends, actually, who I said, what are you doing this weekend? They said, oh, we're going to go to this seminar about a new kind of healing called Reconnective Healing. And I said, that's weird. I just met somebody a couple of weeks ago a few weeks ago in California that does that. And they said, well, why don't you come to the intro lecture, to the Friday night intro, and just check it out? And so I did, just out of curiosity, thinking, well, that'll be something interesting and whatever. And I ended up staying for the weekend. And when I got home on Monday, I kind of woke up and thought, what the heck was that? What did I just go through? And it kind of kept, like tickling the back of my mind. So that's the next part of the story is I actually called up a couple of friends and said, hey, I learned to do this work. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. I need to practice. And why don't you come over and just lie down on my couch, at the time and let's, just check it out so we can see. And it was my way of sort of doing an experiment to see if those people would have any response if I didn't say anything about it. Because the thing about this work you have to understand is it doesn't have to come from our conscious intention or our belief in it for it to work. So that's what we teach. And at the time when I was first beginning the work, I really didn't believe that. I thought, well, some maybe power of suggestion and, somebody, tells me that that's going to make me feel better. Maybe it would. But I didn't tell either of these guys anything. I said, just do me a favor. So they both did, and they both actually had very significant experiences. In fact, one of them had a healing from something that I didn't even know was going on with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And they kind of went away and told a couple of people, and I kind of told a couple of people at my office, and one thing led to another. And in a very short period of time, I had people that were calling me up to schedule these healing appointments. Those first phone calls kind of went something like this, that somebody would say, hello, is this Kelly Woodruff? And I'd say, yes, this is me. And they'd say, well, I'd like to talk to you about scheduling a healing appointment. And I would say, okay. And they'd say, well, can I schedule? And I would say, yeah, I guess so. And they'd say, well, how much? And I'd say, okay. And they'd say, fine. And they would come and have a session. And I tell you another very interesting thing. For the whole first year, every time that I would close the door after a session, I would think to myself, that's crazy. How is that even possible? I don't even know if I believe this myself. And Tom, that's what people were really having reporting really significant healings. As you said, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was blessed to be able to observe one of my employees had a tumor that shrunk from 16 centimeters to 6 centimeters after just a couple of sessions. We were seeing these things happening, and I really, I want everybody to understand the reason I'm telling this story is I came to this work not with a background of anything that would ever suggest that this is something that I would be doing. And yet the universe obviously had a better idea of what I was supposed to be doing than I did.
Now, let me just, let people know that this isn't Reiki or laying of hands or psychic surgery or anything that we've kind of heard of before. This is totally new, and I think that's the reason why when you were first exposed to that weekend that you went, what just happened? Because right. It's just a mind blower, right?
And that's also a really important point. Thank you for that, which is, this work is different. There have been a lot of modalities that have been on the planet for a long time that, we honor those things that have gotten us here. These energy modalities such as Reiki that you mentioned or, Qigong or Jo-Rei, those have a big history and can be quite effective, and have been. But this is different, and it works differently, which is also very important to understand. It works in a different manner. And the great thing is that Dr. Eric Pearl, who was the man that actually brought this work in and began to access this work at the first, had been saying for a really long time, listen, this isn't the same as those things. It's not. And finally now, after all these years, we have actual science. We've been doing a lot of research with some very important scientists all around the planet. In fact, Eric and the head of planning, Doug DeVito, just came back from Russia where they were working with the Russian Olympic team. And the scientists are actually now saying the same thing, which is this isn't the same as those quote-unquote energy modalities that have been around. This seems to be different. It seems to be more. There seems to be more to it. And that's not more as in better necessarily. We use that as to try to explain that, with energy, it was limited, and that the practitioner needed to go someplace and using some sort of technique would channel energy and send energy into the client. And that's how those things worked. And when they created that energetic exchange and the change in the client, it could allow something that was going on for the client to then come into a space where it would heal. But this doesn't work that way. There seems to be more. There's more to it than just energy. We refer to it as this new bandwidth of healing frequencies, this broader bandwidth of healing frequencies that allows for more than just energy. We call it the energy, light, and information of the reconnection.
Okay. So, why don't you tell us what happens during the session? Let's get some images in our mind.
Sure.
What's going on?
Absolutely. Well, again, I quote Dr. Pearl. One of my favorite things that he says and that we teach is, I really don't know. We don't know. I don't know are probably the three most powerful words that we have when doing a work like this, because the truth is we don't have full access to the information yet. But to describe what goes on in a session, it's really quite simple. The client will lie down, typically on a massage table. But that's a very nice, easy way to do the work. They will close their eyes and allow themselves to just relax and drift. Now, I always tell my clients it's best if you do as little as possible. It's almost impossible to do nothing. So I tell them usually just stay sort of in a state of soft observation. Just see what you notice. But it's not necessary to set an intention or to, say a mantra or chant or hold an image in the mind. In fact, the less you can do, the more you can just let go and allow yourself to drift, then you can have the opportunity to have whatever experience is going to be. The practitioner then, simply in their observation, and this is how we do the work. What do we see? What do we feel? We train our people to access this stuff by feeling and by observing. So in their observation, the work is done hands off, by the way. We don't touch our clients. They will open or access or in some way bring in this new broader bandwidth of frequencies. Now, when they do that, this is the significant difference. It allows for the client to connect directly, and that is directly as in without the intercession of the practitioner, to their own source. Now, you want to call it God, love, universe, whatever you choose to name it, the field, the source of all, whatever that is. It allows for the client to connect, to make this connection or this reconnection, if you will. It allows them to make that directly. And when they do that, they begin to receive information on some level far and away beyond what the conscious mind can comprehend. When they do that, it allows for the body to come back into balance and then to move into a space where healings can occur. Now, again, recognize when we talk about healing, we're really talking about healing on all levels with this work. We're not just talking about physical healings. Yes, we certainly still see these remarkable physical healings that happen, symptom relief, as I say, tumors shrinking, all of these things, MS lesions disappearing off the spine, cancers disappearing, all of this stuff. But there's really more to it than that, because when we talk about healing, we're really talking about healing on all levels. Physical, yes, but also emotional, mental, and I'm sure on some level spiritual, probably on a level that we're not able to even understand.
Oh.
So we work, typically the session lasts for somewhere around 35 minutes. At the end of the session, we'll simply touch a client on the shoulder, we'll ask them to relax there, open their eyes, and then we'll have a bit of a period of debriefing where the client will then sort of talk about what they might have experienced while they were on the table. Now, that is an interesting part of the process, because whether we debrief or not doesn't, and whatever the client gets, it doesn't indicate or is not going to in any way predict what kind of quote-unquote healing they received, but rather we simply debrief to allow for the conscious mind to understand that it's had an experience, the client has had an experience far and away different than when, you normally lie down on a massage table. I mean, there are definite things that happen both physically and visually and mentally that the client will typically experience during a session. So we debrief for a while so that the conscious mind can kind of own that experience and that people can start to integrate into their consciousness the information that they've received.
Okay. Let's get back to that new bandwidth of energy, light, and information. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Field by Lynn McTaggart.
Yes.
It's a great, right. It's a great book. Lynn's a wonderful, wonderful writer. She's a journalist. And I recommend that book to any of our listeners, any of your listeners out there who are interested in this concept, these concepts. Because what Lynn has done is she's really taken all of this scientific information and put it into, what shall we say, English, so that we can understand it. And there's also a great movie that both Eric is in and Lynn also is in called The Living Matrix. And this concept of energy, light, and information is really talking about this way that the body can heal by what is being come to be called information medicine. In other words, by receiving this or going into this connection with the universe, God, love, universe, as we say, we receive information that allows for the body to come back into balance. As we've moved along our life path, I believe, my own belief system says we all sort of get pushed and bumped and bruised along the way. Maybe, somehow start to experience or have lessons that we need to learn, sometimes around health, sometimes around, mental challenges. Mm-hmm. And when we come back into this connection to the fullness of the universe, we start to allow those things to begin to drop away because we receive the information as is appropriate for the client. They receive information that allows those things to sort of let go and for the body then to come into this space where they can heal. Now, the important thing, Tom, also is to remember when we're talking about this, we're talking about as directed and guided by the universe. The practitioner isn't doing the work. It's not being done by me. I'm just in observation. That's my job, is to just observe.
Would you be called a channel?
It's not exactly. It's actually better to use the word catalyst.
Okay.
When you think of channel, you sort of think of a pipeline that's sort of, sending or receiving something. This is different. We actually really act as this catalyst. I love that image. When I was a kid, I always remember watching Science for Kid TV show, and, the guy dropped something into a beaker and it made the beaker foam up and bubble over. Mm-hmm. It's sort of that same thing. We act as that catalyst to the connection. And once the connection is made, then the deal sort of happens, if you will, between the universe and the client. So the other thing about that, which is something we have to let go of as practitioners, but is certainly something that also allowed me to do the work, which is we can't make any promises or guarantees, primarily because it's about what's appropriate for the person in the moment.
And how if it's going to know that.
Right. Exactly. Listen, I don't know what's right for you. I don't probably know what's right for me, and I certainly don't know what's the best thing for my clients who come. But if we're able as practitioners to let go of our need to control, diagnose, even to the attachment of outcome, then we're able to observe whatever the grandness of the universe intends for this person. Yes, very often exactly what they've come for. Physical healings, if that's what they're there for, emotional, mental. And sometimes, I quote Eric. He's always said, if you're lucky, you'll get the healing you came for. If you're really, really lucky, you'll get the healing that the universe intended for you.
Mm-hmm. Now, you brought up science in the beaker and all of that. What is some of the scientific research that's being done now to validate this?
Wow. It's really amazing. I just want to first do a little bit of a sort of a shout out and a thank you to our Director of Development, Doug DeVito, because he came to this work also sort of in the same way I did, completely from a background. His background was in science and in business. And so once he was introduced to the work, he really took it upon himself to be the impetus to make these connections with all these scientists around the world so that we could really try to find out what was going on. So I always like to give a little shout out to him and say, thanks, Doug, for really being the person that pulled that forward. We have had the opportunity to work with some of the most really forward-thinking and famous scientists on the planet. The first one that many people know is a guy by the name of Dr. William Tiller, Bill Tiller, who was in the movie What the Bleep, which I'm sure you and many of our listeners have probably seen. Mm-hmm. Bill is a professor emeritus from Stanford University who was very well known for writing something called the Tiller-Einstein theory of negative entropy. It was quite a big deal in the science community a number of years ago. So the first thing that we did that was really remarkable, I think, that really sticks in my mind is that Bill came into the seminar, and what he did was he took measurements before the seminar began, during the seminar, and after the seminar of what was happening in the room itself. And he found out a very interesting thing. Something happens in the physical space of the room that changes so significantly that he's never seen anything like it in any other seminar or comparable sort of event. Something literally changes to the energetics of the room. It changes in the energetics of the room.
And the energy in the room somehow?
Actually, what he does is he measures something called the ambient free energy of the room, which in English is actually this sort of idea that there's a lot of sort of loose energy sort of floating around. Mm-hmm. And what Bill theorizes is as that number decreases, the order, if you will, of the room increases. In other words, he goes on to talk about this concept of entropy, which is the law of the universe that this, our 3D, 4-dimensional world sort of is governed by. And he talks about how that natural order of things is for things to sort of fall apart and disintegrate and age and, eventually to pass. But he says that when this shift happens, the function of that actually decreases so that the natural order of things then goes back into order, to health, back into almost as if time is reversed. So this is the measure that he's using. And he notes that in our seminar, not only does it happen during the seminar, but interestingly enough, that change occurs before we ever get there. Before we ever start the seminar, it's as if something else comes into the room and sets it up so that then our seminar attendees can walk in, no matter what their background, and actually go through this shift that then allows them to access this stuff. I mean, that's really exciting. When I talk about it, I almost get goosebumps. I mean, it's such a big deal. And I mean, this is real science. This is not kidding around. Another study, some series of studies that we've done with Dr. Gary Schwartz of the University of Arizona, also quite a well-known guy, has been on sort of the forefront of trying to experiment or test these sorts of things in this sort of realm. And Gary's done a series of tests with us and with our practitioners to see what happens to them as they learn the work, and then if he can measure what they're actually able to do. And indeed, he has found ways that he actually says that he can measure that people can walk into our seminars completely unable to have this sort of skill and then learn in just 2 days, by the way. The seminar is only a 2-day event. It just takes 2 days to learn everything you need to learn to be able to do this work. He says that they can then walk out able to access and to manage this frequency, this bandwidth of healing energies. And that's something that he's been working on, different ways of studying it. He's thrown every kind of test that you can imagine and basically thrown the kitchen sink at them to try to find all the differences of the changes that occur. So that's another thing we've done. The third one I'm going to cite, and there are more, but these are just some of the outstanding ones, is with a guy who is named Konstantin Kurakov. This is the guy that's head of the Russian athletic medical team in St. Petersburg. And he actually has for a long time been doing experiments with the body's energy field. He has devices that he can measure the energy field of the body. And long before we ever became in contact with him, he was using this device to be able to predict the correlations between the body's energy field and health, mental acuity, predicting athletic performance, basically based on these measures that he could take of the energy field. So, of course, he wanted to know what would happen to this energy field when it became come in contact with reconnective healing frequencies. So we've done a whole bunch of experiments with him, and the graphing and mapping of it is absolutely fantastic. You can literally see the body's energy field increase and strengthen after a reconnective healing session. And he says, based on all of his other research that he had done prior, using this as a measure of health, athletic performance, etc., that it's clear that reconnective healing is having a significant effect that will then manifest as increased health, etc.
Can you use this healing technique on yourself, Kelly?
Absolutely. That's one of the big pieces that we teach. I just wanted to take a pause here, Tom, not to sound like a commercial, but we've been talking about the seminar, but just so that everyone knows, we are doing these seminars every weekend. I have one that's coming up on May 7th and 8th in Charlotte, North Carolina, but we're somewhere every weekend. We teach people to do this all the time. As I said, we've trained about 65,000 practitioners around the world. Many people come to our seminar because they are seeking their own healing. So they come to learn about self-healing. In fact, the title of Eric's book, the full title of Eric's book, you might recall, is The Reconnection, Heal Others, Heal Yourself. So one of the aspects and one of the things that people use it for very often is self-healing. But there's another thing about it that I think is really fascinating, and this is something that we started to notice by doing our own sort of poll of our practitioners. And that is just by being willing to step in and try to help others, that the practitioners report that they themselves, without necessarily doing self-healing, quote unquote, but they themselves enjoy a higher level of health, a higher level of lifestyle, abundance. I mean, there's something about being willing to use this work and sort of soaking in the frequencies on a regular basis that actually offers this. It's almost like a universal kickback system, that the practitioner actually receives benefits themselves. Mm-hmm. I know I'm sort of the poster child for that in just the silliest ways. I used to be plagued. I live in New York, and I used to have allergies real bad and be plagued with colds all the time. And I've been doing the work. I mean, literally would have a cold during the winter, usually about once a month or once every 6 weeks. And I have been doing the work for about 8 years, and I have only been sick twice in 8 years now. And those 2 times were both because I had let myself get so run down running around teaching and doing everything I do that I think the universe was just saying, would you please stop and sit down for a minute, Kelly? So, yeah, it's remarkable.
Now, you mentioned, Dr. Pearl's book. It's called The Reconnection, Heal Others, Heal Yourself. And he talks about how you don't necessarily have to be in the same room with the person, that you could do this long distance or over the phone or...
Absolutely. Listen, understand, this stuff works out of the bounds of regular space and time. We're talking about accessing a new level of healing that it goes beyond our physical space. So if you allow for yourself to have the extension of that, then it makes total sense why distance healing. Honestly, I have to tell you the truth. Some of the most dramatic healings that I have had the pleasure of being in observation have happened with distance clients. One of my favorite stories is a woman who called me up from Uruguay. Uruguay. I had to go get a map, to find out exactly where in South America that was. And she had called me because she found my name on the practitioner directory and she lived in New York, and she just thought, oh, well, this is the right person to call. So she did, and we did a session on her. She told me afterwards, because another aspect of this is we tell our clients not to tell us beforehand. As I say, the less I know, the better off you are. Because as I'm not doing the work, it's easier for me to let go to my attachment to outcome if I don't know until afterwards. But afterwards, she told me she had unexplained swelling in her knee that had not made her unable to walk and go downstairs. She hadn't been able to go down the stairs of her apartment for almost a week. And we did a session one session, and she called me and she said, "Oh, hi, I just wanted to let you know, I'm going out to get some groceries, and I'm going to go by the doctor and see if you can tell me what this was, because it's gone now."
Yeah.
After just one session.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. If you just think about it for a minute, we're talking about something that it's not necessary for us to be in the physical space, because it's not working on there's no transference, or, as you say, I'm not sending anything directly. I'm allowing for this accessing that happens on an entirely another plane, a completely different dimension than where we are standing, in our physical space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, I mean, that's further proof that you don't need to burn the incense, you don't need to wear the special robe, or have the crystal in your pocket, or...
Well, you have been reading the book. Good for you.
Right.
Well, listen, I always say when we talk about that stuff, I'm not denigrating those practices and I think in some ways, seriously, those things probably were necessary before this. I think it might have literally been, those tools might have been needed to try to get up to and access something. But we've made a shift. I mean, there's definitely been a shift. Yeah. You know that. Your listeners know that. I mean, if we just look around at the physical changes that are going on the planet, the political upheavals, the financial markets are changing. I mean, there's so much change that have been going on. I mean, we've been talking about this shift for ages. I mean, they talked about, when I was a kid, they talked about the age of Aquarius and the harmonic convergence. And now everyone's talking about 2012. What's going to happen? 2012, 2012, 2012. So we recognize this shift has been happening for quite some time. And I think because of that shift, and at the same time, simultaneously, because of our shift, the shift that we've made in our consciousness, minute group shift of consciousness, has allowed us to go to this space where all of those other tools and rituals and things that we used to have to do to get there, no longer necessary to access something that's entirely new. It's an entirely new level of healing that we can bring forward. We pretty much make our attendees two promises, and I want to share those so that people understand. The first promise that we make them is, you're going to walk out of here on Sunday after just 2 days with having learned everything that you need to know, everything that we can teach you seriously to be able to access this level of healing. And when I say that, I mean the exact same kinds of healings that Dr. Pearl sees, or any of our senior practitioner, or that I've been gifted to observe. You will know at the end of those 2 days, by Sunday evening, you'll know everything that you need to know to be able to access that same level of healing. And the other thing that I can say to them, that we promise our people, is, and this level of healing that you're able to access is equal or greater to anything anyone else is on the planet accessing at this time. And that's a pretty big promise. I know people sometimes kind of balk at that. They say, well, how can you say that? How could I possibly learn in 2 days, something that could be comparable to, somebody else that I know that had to study for years and years and years to be able to go to another level and yet another level and another level and another level. And it's because we don't teach it in the same way. It's not learned in that same process that some of those other things were necessary to do. We're letting go of technique here. We're letting go of the need for ritual. And in some ways, we're letting go for our need to consciously understand.
Yeah, sure.
We're stepping into a new level.
Yeah. I was going to say getting the ego out of the way completely.
Well, that's kind of the part that takes practice sometimes.
Okay. That's why it's 2 days instead of five sessions.
I mean, honestly, and I say that again from my own place and my own learning. I stand up in front. I've been gifted, I guess, or I don't know. It's still a mysterious process how I ended up being one of only 3 teachers that Eric allows to teach the work. But when I stand up in front of the room, I can pretty much tell every story that I tell to demonstrate all of these things are things that I went through. You pretty much name a mistake that you can go forward with learning this kind of work. And I probably at some point or another sort of did it and learned my lesson from it.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things I learned about is it's not up to us. We're not doing the work. And we need to get our ego out of the way. At the same time, get our attachment to outcome out of the way. Because just like you can't take responsibility if the healing doesn't manifest in the way that you wanted it to, you also can't take responsibility if the healing does manifest in that way. And once we understand that our job is just to stand back and observe, accessing these frequencies, feeling, observation, observing, allowing the client then to make the connection and do the work, then we really have stepped past our own need for ego and affirmation. As I said, at the end of that year when I kept being so doubtful, I finally just figured out, okay, Kelly, shut up, get out of the way. If people will come, they're going to come, and if they're going to meant to be having healings, they will, and if they don't, then they won't, and you won't have to do it. You won't do it anymore. I mean, it's as simple as that. And the minute I was able to let go of that, we had a huge shift and a huge expansion, both in the practice and what we were seeing as far as quote-unquote results, which is always a dicey word,
Yeah. To get back to some of the physical things that Reconnective healing could help with, can it help a person with, let's say, that wants to quit smoking or wants to lose weight or something like that, a habit thing?
Absolutely. Well, this kind of begs around to the question, which we always phrase as the can it work on question. And that can be a full range of anything,
Okay.
Or a challenge physically. Can it help with mental issues, emotion, depression, addiction issues, whatever? And the answer is always the same. Yes. And that's because this is a healing. It's not treatment. And if we make the distinction between healing and treatment, we make the distinction between healing and the relief of symptoms, which is basically how we in the West always think about somebody healing. It's like, they're healed, so they got better. That means they don't have headaches anymore,
right.
Or they don't smoke any longer, or they don't, overeat, or whatever those things might be. When we understand when we talk about healing, we're talking about a new definition of healing on all levels. So again, if it's appropriate for that person to stop smoking and begin to eat better and treat themselves right, if that's how the healing is supposed to manifest for that person, it will.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people, had a lot of people come to me at one point in my practice, with addiction issues. A lot of people coming with addiction issues. And, did it work? Yes. Did it work every time? No. It's just the exact same answer. If it's appropriate, it will do it. If it's not, it's not going to. It's not time for that person to let go of that with this. And again, that's the thing that we have to understand. We can't make any promises or guarantees, but we recognize that the healing always manifests as it's supposed to. I've had people come to me for things like, let's say chronic headaches, and report the first thing that they noticed was that their depression lifted.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yeah.
And then afterwards they recognized that the headaches had gone away. So, we're talking about really truly healing the whole person, not just relief of physical, mental, or emotional symptoms, but really all aspects. And that's significant. That's a new level. We don't think that way in the West. We think, cancer, got to get it out, cut the tumor out, give them radiation, send them on their way, they're fine, they're healed, they're done. It doesn't come back, then they're done. But, there's more to it than that.
Yeah. Tell us about this thing you got going with yoga, Reconnective yoga.
Well, life is a funny thing, and the universe, again, I think it does its thing for a reason. As you said, I had a career in theater for a while and was a dancer and came to New York, and that's what I did for about 20 years. And, through all of that, at one point when I was young, I had a bit of a yoga practice. I always make the joke, I don't think it stuck the first time, but I think this time it has. But I had a bit of a yoga practice, which sort of fell off as my life changed and my career changed and whatnot. And for some reason, after I became a Reconnective healing practitioner and started doing this work, I was drawn back to my practice. And I had an experience in class simultaneous on the West Coast, some experienced practitioners also who were in yoga class, being, yogis to a degree, had the same experience. And that was during class, during the yoga practice, we noticed that the frequencies would sort of switch on by themselves. They would just, all of a sudden, we'd be doing a position and suddenly you'd feel it in a particular place and you suddenly felt supported or expanded or there was something that shifted. And it was quite remarkable for a number of reasons. One, that the frequencies were switching on spontaneously without us thinking about them. But beyond that, that what was happening in the practice when that did happen, that we seemed to have a smoother, easier, more expanded practice. So we started having conversations among ourselves, like what would happen if we consciously brought the frequencies into a yoga practice? What would we, what would happen? Can we do that? And that's really how Reconnective Yoga was born. We actually launched the program about 3.5 years ago, started with a series of one-day workshops. And then we were really excited because this past fall in Los Angeles and then again in Amsterdam, we trained our first ever crop of Reconnective Yoga instructors, 7 of which around the world are now certified to offer Reconnective Yoga classes, where they literally teach their students how to access and use the frequencies for themselves during a yoga practice and see what happens, how that is. And it's totally great. It's great. It's really remarkable. We were just up in Kripalu, which is a big yoga institute in western Massachusetts, and we had some open classes. And, those yoga people at Kripalu, those are really, strong, hard and fast yogis, and those people came out of our open classes really amazed and transformed at what a difference it made when we brought these frequencies into class. It makes sense if you think about it. If you know anything about yoga, the translation literally is union. It means union. And of course, what does reconnection talk about is reconnecting back to the fullness of the universe. So those two things, this ancient science of yoga and this new sort of science of healing, have the same thing in common.
Sure.
And putting them two together make a really strong and powerful practice. It's been great. We're really excited about the program. We're offering classes all over the place now. We're able to offer, we have enough teachers actually that can go with us to our seminars. We're going to be offering that as a morning edition in our seminar in Charlotte and throughout all the seminars coming up this year, basically everywhere we have it covered. And then those teachers are also going back to their own studios and offering Reconnective Yoga. All of this information, by the way, I just want to say can be found on our website.
Yeah, that was my next question.
It's really important. Yeah, it's really important that people understand. I'm spewing a lot of stuff really quickly, that everything that I'm talking about can be really found on the website, which is www.thereconnection, just like it sounds, thereconnection.com. And on there you can find out about our seminars and events, the schedule of seminars, events, where we'll be teaching around the world. Can find out more about Reconnective Yoga. You can actually find out more about the history of Reconnective Healing, about Eric's history and how the work came in at first, as well as answers to what we call our frequently asked questions, like how do I find a practitioner, or what can I expect during a session, or how all of that stuff. And they can also register for our seminars right there online at the Reconnection website. So anyone that's listening that would like to have more information, please go to the website, www.thereconnection.com. Also, they can call the office in Los Angeles, which is an easy number to remember, 888-ERIC-PEARL, and talk to the nice folks there, and they'll give them any other information that they need.
All right. Kelly, this is amazing stuff, and
hey, Tom, so when are you going to come join us at a seminar? We'll be teaching in New York in September, third week of September. I'm teaching levels 1, 2, and 3. You got to come out and join us.
Sounds great. We'll be in touch, definitely. And
right.
Folks, check out the website. This is a really amazing stuff. If you get a chance, read Dr. Pearl's book. Not only is it very informative, it's funny.
Yeah, he's a funny guy, right? I mean, that's the nice thing about it. Yeah. He's a really funny guy. It's a really great read, and it really gives you a sense of not just who Eric is, how the work really talks to the universal laws of healing in a wonderful and joyous way.
Right.
And that's the great thing about this. This isn't, it's serious, but it's not unfun. I mean, it's fun. We teach our people to go into the session and play.
Right.
And enjoy themselves. And that's great.
Kelly, thanks so much for being with us. Kelly Woodruff, ladies and gentlemen. I guess you can get in touch with you at the website as well, Kelly.
Absolutely. Go to the practitioner directory and you can either type in my name or search by New York City and I'll pop right up there on my contact information and phone number or email and all that stuff is on there if they'd like to reach me. I'm more than happy to answer any additional questions that somebody would have or schedule a session or talk about registering for our seminar. Again, I'd like to invite everyone who's listening to come down to Charlotte and join us there. Looking forward to a great time in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a wonderful, wonderful town and I'm sure the seminar is going to be great.
All right. Terrific. Thanks again, Kelly. And this is Tom Murasso from BornToManifest.com and Myth or Logic Radio. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time. Peace out, and we love you.